So a lot of people bash the Kilt Lens because it's fitted with a lot of limitations. It doesn't have the best build quality, it has variable aperture range, it's quite slow in terms of aperture, it's not the sharpest, it doesn't zoom very far, it doesn't go as wide as other lenses. So yes, this 18-105 lens does zoom more than the Kilt Lens, this 10-18 does go wider than the Kilt Lens, and this 50mm prime lens does have better low light, but this small Kilt Lens does what all of these do, just not very well. So here's how to master the Kilt Lens. So although I'm talking about Kilt lenses in general, in this video I'm going to be using the Sony Kilt Lens. Now different Kilt lenses will have different stats, but most of them are very similar, and the tips in this video can be applied to most Kilt lenses. So the Sony Kilt Lens has a focal length of 16mm and can zoom all the way in to 50mm. It also has a variable aperture of f3.5 to 5.6. So what this means is that it can go from kinda wide to kind of zoomed in. When it's wide, it lets in a good amount of light, but the more you zoom in, the darker the image goes. This can become a problem for video shooters because if you're zooming in during a shot, you can see the video slowly decreasing in exposure. An easy way to fix this is by setting your aperture to f5.6 or higher and then zooming in. That way the aperture will stay constant during the zoom range. For the sake of simplicity, instead of talking about every focal length between 16 and 50mm, let's just say that this lens is a 2-in-1. It's a 16mm at f3.5 and it's a 50mm at f5.6. 16mm gives a look that is very similar to what a cell phone has. It's nice and wide and can be used for vlogging or for another camera shot. This shot is a 16mm. It's also good for landscapes and wide shots in short films. But 50mm is a good focal length to get details. It's the perfect focal length to get portraits, and it's very nice for close-ups of things. Because the focal length is much higher, you'll start getting much shallower depth of field, even though you have a slower aperture than at 16mm. Another good thing that this lens has is the size. Like mentioned before, this is an 18-105 f4 lens. It does everything that this Kilt Lens does, just better. But as you can see, the drawback is that this lens is quite big. If I were to pack light for a day, the Kilt Lens would be perfect. It would be a great option compared to the 18-105 as it even fits in the front pocket of my backpack, which is very neat, and when I go street photography with this thing, I'm drawing way less attention to myself because the camera is so small. This can become a double-edged sword though, because if this is the only lens that you own and you want to do client works, your client might take you less seriously just because of the size of your camera. But that might only be an issue with the a6300 because it's so small. If you were to be using a Panasonic or Canon Kilt Lens, well, this wouldn't be an issue. Something that is quite overlooked is the fact that this lens is stabilized. Being your first lens, a lot of people don't realize how crucial this feature is. But if you compare this lens compared to a 50mm non-stabilized lens, you'll realize that the difference is massive. Without stabilization, you need to stabilize it in post or get a gimbal or a tripod, and just using a lens becomes a pain in the ass. This isn't an issue with the Kilt Lens though, because with the stabilization, it becomes a lot easier to just use the lens handheld. With this feature, you can also get better low light photos by using the elbow stabilizer trick that I showed in this video right here. Another issue that people have with the Kilt Lens is that they can't get great bokeh. But that's not exactly true. You can definitely get bokeh with the Kilt Lens. You see, something that is very overlooked with the Kilt Lens is the fact that it has a really good minimum focus distance. Although it's not a macro lens, it still kills the 18-105 that I mentioned earlier. With this lens, you can achieve great bokeh by just getting closer to your subject and zooming in at 50mm. Even if your aperture is at f5.6, you still get great shallow depth of field just because you're getting closer to your subject. Some people say that the Kilt Lens isn't very sharp, but sharpness has never really been an issue for me. You see, if we compare these two pictures, it's actually very hard to tell which one is the Kilt Lens and which one is the 50mm prime lens. They're essentially like identical images. It's only when you pixel peep that you can finally see that the 50mm lens is a bit sharper than the Kilt Lens, but in normal view or normal everyday scenarios, seeing the difference between the kit lens and the 50mm lens is, well, quite indistinguishable. Although people say the kit lens isn't the greatest lens, it's still the first lens that you get for a reason. But something to remember is that only a bad craftsman blames his tools. And as you can see with these random photos that I got from Reddit, it's very possible to get a great result with just the kit lens. You see, it was never a question of what lens you use or what resolution camera you have or what kind of sensor size you have. But what really mattered this whole time was just what's in front of the camera.